This video is with a strength and conditioning colleague of mine from New Zealand. It's already the second recording because the first recording we couldn't publish of technical glitches. However, even in the second recording we experienced some technical glitches. Maybe it's too far for the technicality to work from New Zealand to mid-Europe. Anyway, so there are a few technical glitches. However, I believe there's so much value in this interview that I still wanted to publish it. If you want to see the transcript, it's available on my website, so you can also read through the interview. So now enjoy this interview with Andrew Keene.
Today I'm joined by Andrew Keene. Andrew is Senior Strength and Conditioning Coach for High Performance Sport New Zealand. Andrew is currently working with kayak, athletics, BMX, and is the lead coach for 9 S&C coaches. Andrew has worked in the past with track cycling from New Zealand, and these were also his most notable successes, the World Championships in 2014, 15, and 16, as well as the silver medal at the Rio Olympics in the team sprint. Welcome, Andrew.
Cheers, Christian.
How did you get into strength and conditioning?
It was a bit of a long journey because I didn't do it straight out of school. Left school, got a job. Not sure what triggered me wanting to go and do some study, but I'd always loved sport. I'd always loved training, and something triggered me to go and do some study. And I did a certificate in exercise science, 1-year certificate, and that was me. I loved it. Continued to study, and knew I just wanted to work in sport or work in fitness. And as I started to work through my studies, was reinforced to me, yeah, I'd love to. And here I am, 25 years later, still doing strength and conditioning.
Okay. Nice. That's an achievement so long.
Well, I'm not full-time strength conditioning. I've been working in the fitness industry. I've been teaching, training, but yeah, 25 years in the industry.
Nice.
There's a while.
Yeah. And in your life as an S&C coach, what was your darkest moment?
Darkest moment. When you sent the questions through, I had to reflect on it, and 2 moments came up that are quite different. One was being on the sideline of a rugby game and seeing a athlete that I looked after badly injure his leg, and he actually broke his leg in half. His tibia and fibula split it in half, foot behind him, and he was lying in pain on the ground. And that's a moment that I just won't forget. That was one of the first things that came to mind. And on a probably opposite end of the continuum, sort of, was when we got the silver medal at the Rio Olympics. That's it's a moment that I will not forget.
Why was it a dark moment?
We were dominant. We were dominant into Rio. We were unbeaten over 4 years. We knew GB were going to be fast. We knew they're going to be strong, but we were in really good form. And as it turned out, we hit the goals that had been set. It seemed like we'd done what we needed. We broke an Olympic record in qualifying. Not qualifying, get into the final. And then, and then to lose the final by 0.1 of a second to Team GB. And just a moment I will not forget.
I believe that. What did you learn from these moments?
I think with the fracture to the rugby player, realised how I could be calm in quite a stressful situation. When I got to the player, I was one of the first people to get to the player. I knew that I didn't want to add to the moment, and I was quite calm myself, and I looked after him as well as other staff. And that's on reflection wasn't a very nice situation, but it was a cool moment that I was able to be calm and supportive in a situation which was quite horrible. To see someone in that position with their foot like that, I had the presence of mind to be there for him, to support him, and to be calm. And that's yeah, definitely something, a learning situation. As far as the Olympics and the silver medal, a simple learning there is just don't be complacent. We thought we'd done enough, but we hadn't. We hadn't. And that's something that I will always remember.
That's an interesting one. Do you think you have not done enough? Because in the end, you reached your target, you broke the Olympic record, and maybe, I'm just speaking my mind, maybe it's just enough to accept that you did everything you did, and yeah, sometimes someone is better.
True, and I agree. But as anyone would say, working in sport, you are always looking to be better, and a learning is to keep challenging. Like I thought we had a good plan, everything was working well. Were we challenging the right things? Were we asking the right questions? And to be fair, we still probably would have had the same outcome. But yeah, it's just around the complacency, challenging, questioning. Is there stuff that we're not doing right? But just a caveat to that, we can, you hear about marginal gains and that sort of thing talked about. But when I say this, I always reinforce that it's what we call meat and potatoes, getting the 99% right first before worrying about that 1%ers. So yes, ask the question, challenge, but you got to do the basics right. And we did the basics right.
What was your best moment?
Easy. 2013. Sorry, the first team sprint world title in 2014. Easily a top moment. It was fantastic. The boys getting the silver medal at Rio. That's an amazing achievement. But for me, as a new support crew, we had a new coach, new S&C, new nutrition. It was just new support staff, and to come together we just centralised in Cambridge. We'd only been in our building a month, 2 months before World Champs. Before that, we'd been making do in other facilities, and we became quite tight, and got their first World Champs, and that is definitely a highlight for my career.
Anything you learned from that moment?
I don't know. What did I learn? I don't know. I suppose at the time it reinforced what we were doing was working. And I suppose when you look at achievements or non-achievements through your career, they are times to reflect and benchmark. What did I do? What could I do better? And obviously we've done quite well. It was a fast time from memory. I don't think it was their fastest. But obviously the program was moving in the right direction. It was New Zealand's first world title. It signalled quite a cool era for New Zealand cycling. In later years, we've got the team pursuit world title, few world championship medals, and I think Kieran sprints. Gee, I'm just trying to think, rattle them off now. Quite a cool momentum for Cycling New Zealand, and performances led into Rio. It was a good time to be part of it.
If you could travel back in time, 10, 15, maybe 20 years, what advice would you give your younger you?
Oh, this is an easy answer. Start earlier with an internship or giving away your time. Like I said, I started rather late. I had another career. I started studying, and I chose to chase money rather than opportunities. I was offered teaching positions. I took them, so it gave me some financial stability, but it wasn't really where I wanted to head. So ironically, teaching makes you learn more deeply and greater understanding. It also gave me the opportunity to learn from others. So in a long-about way, it probably did help me more. But it took years to break into full-time S&C with high-performance athletes. I was working with high performance athletes, but I wasn't working with them in high performance programs. I was working in satellite programs with regional athletes who were representing New Zealand. So it's amazing opportunities, but I wasn't working full time. I was teaching, doing other bits and pieces. So for someone who wants to be an S&C, straight away, give away your time, get an internship, start working with athletes, get involved with programs, basically get known. It's the networks that get you into the jobs. It's very hard to apply for a position and not be known and get that job unless you've got a great CV.
That's an interesting one. What strategies would you use to get known?
So basically get into the networks, the internship programs, start giving away your time, assisting staff who are working in high performance programs. Generally there are internship programs available, apply for them. If you don't get them, keep trying. In the meantime, as soon as possible. It's something I did do on the side and it did help me. And I'd reinforce if you can't work within a high performance program as an intern or whatever, you've got to be walking the walk. Got to get out on the floor, deliver, start developing your trade. But to get known, is to get involved and start getting a reputation, and that's what allowed me to get my first break. I got employed because people knew who I was, knew what I did, and when I reflect on every job I've got since, it's because they knew me.
Speaking about S&C and advices, what advice would you give young aspiring S&C coaches?
There's quite a bit. I've been a teacher and also having people ask me questions. I do have almost an outline, and trying to simplify it. Probably the first thing is to be able to talk the talk. Even though I appreciate it's an applied job, but at the high level there has to be some significant underpinning knowledge. And so by talk to talk, I mean understand the game, understand the research, understand study, be able to talk to talk. So when people ask you why you do something, you have an underpinning understanding and can talk to that. And well, basically any question with an S&C. And then on top of that, be able to walk the walk, train yourself, try a range of different things. If I was going back to my, say, 15, 16-year-old self, I would have done a whole range of different sports, tried a whole different range of different things to improve my ability to walk the walk and understand that. I'm not saying it's critical that you should be able to do different types of training yourself, but by doing it yourself, you get a different level of understanding. And then on top of your empirical and knowledge-based understanding, the two are quite strong, I feel. And then the next step is once you've got some base knowledge, you've got a bit of understanding yourself, is possible, even if you're not ready, start training others. Being on the floor, it takes time. It takes time to takes real time to develop your eye. I'm still learning. Going off topic, I was lucky enough to sit in a session with Dan Pfaff last year. And, I think I've got an okay eye. What that guy can see is just crazy. He had 4 people doing skipping movements, and I was able to look at one person's lower leg movement and try and figure out what was going on. He watched 4 people, and he had isolated different things that were going on in each person's skills. That guy has an amazing eye. It's a finely tuned eye, and so that takes time and practice. But yeah, so get on the floor, develop your leadership, develop your eye, and start putting theory into practice. So start programming, start doing your procedures, your monitoring, your testing, etc., etc. Start getting into that groove. And then to help fine tune all those abilities, watch other S&Cs, shadow them. In an internship program, you'll be able to do that. If you can't, try and shadow an S&C. Watch what they do, learn from them. And I'd also recommend, if it's able to, a range of S&Cs, because every S&C brings in a different skill set, a different ability that you can learn from. and allows you to compare and contrast as well.
Hmm.
Probably getting a bit more formal, to try and get your CV built up and to get through some doors. Maybe get accreditation, whether it's an NSCA accreditation. I forget what the European accreditation is, but
UK.
It's an unfortunate thing that when we look at a CV, we go straight to an accreditation, and you can talk about the pros and cons of an accreditation, but it does establish a certain baseline of ability, a certain baseline of knowledge. So when I see it, I know they've passed the test. Doesn't mean they're any good. It just means that they've established some sort of baseline. Me personally, my test is I want to see them on the floor. I want to see how they lead, how they talk. Anyone can study hard, but there's a skill to being on the floor. And probably my last suggestion to a young S&C is be patient. It takes a while. It's not going to happen overnight. And sorry to sound like the old fart, but young people these days, I'm saying it, young people these days, they expect it real fast, real soon, and it just doesn't happen. These things, it takes time to develop these skills, maturity, understanding. And so my advice is, look, I know you want it tomorrow, but it's going to take years. Take years to polish. And if you get in too soon, if you get promoted too soon, you might find it backfiring on you. And I've seen S&Cs who have gone in hard, gone in early, and have lost jobs and never got hired again. It's probably a bit dark in that, but be patient. That would be my final.
Do you think it's the generation? Do you think you were different?
Yes.
I think I also was quite impatient at the beginning. I think I'm still impatient, but
we're in an era where things are easy to get.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait. You buy now, pay later. I definitely think it's a generational thing. They expect. I feel like the old man. They expect it. They expect to happen now. And the simple answer is no. It will not happen now. You're not ready. I'm not saying that that's true for everyone, because some people mature at different levels. Some people have different levels of intelligence, take time to develop. But on the whole, S&C takes time. I reflect on a study by the NSCA years ago where they had 4 S&Cs and they watched them do sessions, and they and the collective experience across these 4 S&Cs, was it 4 or whatever, it was like 120 years. Like, these were senior S&Cs who'd been around a long time, and what was real cool is the behaviours are quite similar across these S&Cs, high experienced. And one of the stats, which was cool, and I'm going to misquote it, but 80% of the time they didn't do anything, which I thought was just brilliant. They had the confidence to say and do nothing and watch. And in myself, I realised I say less, do less than when I started. I let athletes, again, you give the athletes not criteria. You set the scene for athletes, what you'd like them to do, and then let them go for it. And it was quite. And I know. I'm not saying I'm the expert, but I know I'm getting to that point now where I'm happy to say less, watch more, and just facilitate what the athletes are doing. And that was in the study. That's exactly what they were doing. They watched, they provided feedback, they facilitated as required. That takes time. Young coaches get in there.
Yeah,
they get in there, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. There are times in the developmental progress of an athlete, from young to old, that you're going to obviously have a bit more time, a bit more input when they're young. You're going to talk more, etc., etc. But I still think there's an opportunity to talk less and let them develop and learn. It takes time. Be patient.
I think it's a good point. I also think that once probably the maturity of the S&C coach, but I also think it has to do with what you just mentioned, the stage of the athlete. I'm always thinking of there's a leadership model, I think Blanchard is the name or something like that, and goes through different stages. So it starts in the early stage, the leader has to be directive, and then later facilitative.
Yes.
And I think that's also what I'm seeing, at least for myself, with my athletes. The younger they are, you're a little bit more on, coaching. And the older they are, they kind of, sometimes you can question, do I need to be there? But, you provide feedback once it's really needed, and they become very self-sufficient over time. But again, it takes time. Looking back at how long I work with most of them, and we're talking about years.
It sounds funny, but the goal is to not be needed.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the goal.
I agree.
So the irony is, you're always needed. You just need it in a different capacity. You become a facilitator, a consultant. And so when athletes get really self-sufficient, understand, but then you might be working with an athlete who's say 15 years experience, but you bring 25 years. So you still have a part to play. But our job is to not be needed.
In the end, I also think we need to teach them to be able to do it by themselves, because sometimes as an S&C coach, you're not always around, and they still need to be able to do this stuff. I remember once I was working with the Junior Davis Cup team from Britain in the LTA, and we had to train one day in a different gym. It was a commercial gym. And the guys entered and they looked around and said, "Oh, we can't do anything what is on our program." Luckily, I was there. So, you rearrange the dip bars and then put bar on top so they can do the squats and stuff like that. But that moment I realized if I wouldn't have been there, they would have left the gym without doing anything. And that's probably in an early stage of an athlete. They look around and oh, I can't train, so let's go.
When you're thinking there's so much to do here. There's just opportunities everywhere. You just got to figure it out. It's interesting you say that on a tangent. It dawned on me a few years ago, actually a while ago now, the importance of young athletes being exposed to different leaders. I remember having a squad that looked after, and some of the squad had come from different other squads, and one squad, other half of the squad were athletes that only had worked with me, hadn't worked with anyone else. And I wasn't around for a session, and someone else came in and took the session, and the athletes who had only been with me fought with this other S&C covering. They didn't trust is strong, but because it wasn't me, the messages didn't sound right, didn't feel right. Whereas the athletes who had been with other S&Cs and heard different messages were fine. Oh, yeah, sweet, I can do that. And that reflects, if as part of the learning model, if it's possible, get them exposed to different people. So they realise that there isn't just one way. There is different messages, but it will hopefully achieve the same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to come back to one of the things you said in the beginning. You have an outline for young S&Cs or something like that, you said?
Yeah, because I've got, you get emails, and me being a bit anal, I don't want to keep writing emails, the same email, keep writing. So I just, if I get a question, I'll reply to someone and I'll file that away, and I'll keep playing with it. And the other thing too, and no doubt it'll be part of what you do as well. You start talking to other S&Cs, and we start having meetings, and we talk to these things. One of the questions coming up about training philosophies, we sat down last year as a group and went through our philosophies. And it was a real cool thing to do. I'd recommend it to any team of S&Cs, is to sit down and talk through your philosophies. It actually got a wee bit emotional, because there was a moment where it brought the team together and people started talking about it was quite cool. And it was interesting to hear the old guys versus the young guys and had different personalities. So some of the young guys, their philosophies were very procedural. 1 + 1 = 2. This is how we're going to train people. And the old guys, it was not procedural at all. It was more around the athlete, the environment, the program. That was quite a fascinating observation. But like I said, as part of the meeting, there were moments around how we balance work life and discussions. And I'm not sure what it's like overseas. In New Zealand, we don't seem to keep S&Cs in the industry. It's a tough industry, working long hours, and that needs to be balanced for longevity of jobs. And we started to start talking about that as far as our philosophy about, well, how do we look after ourselves, let alone how do we look after our athletes. I digress, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I remember you and me spoke about that a few years ago, but recently I sat down with Dan Baker, and I asked him, and he said, like, it seems to be after the 15-year mark, plus minus a few years, that S&C coaches look at transitioning out, and then they either become a head of S&C, so more managerial, or they go into lecturing. So it's a phenomenon that we are facing, yeah.
Yeah, and Dan Baker's the example of longevity. He had, 22 years with the Broncos?
He's an example for a few things.
What was that?
He's an example for a few things. I highly respect him. I think he's an awesome guy.
He certainly is. Yeah, he's an example. He's involved in research, as you talked to. He had that longevity with the Broncos. He was, obviously a main contributor to ASCA. And as people will know who go to the ASCA conference, he loves a good Corona.
Yeah, he does. Cool. But I mean, I like this stuff about S&C and development. Maybe we have a follow-up interview on that, or follow-up chat. Let's go into the more S&C coaching questions.
Yeah.
So what is your coaching philosophy?
As I said, last year we met as a group and we talked about our philosophies, and I typed mine out, and so there's actually a bit of a list, and I'll briefly go through. But the thing that actually kicked off when I was talking about philosophies is I do buy into our organisational philosophy, which is athlete focused, performance driven, coach led. Those are principles our organisation follow, and I thoroughly agree. So as a philosophy, as a big picture approach, it does need to be athlete focused. It does need to be performance. Coach, someone else to lead. Moving on and talking about, like I said before, the old guys, we tend to look at the bigger picture, and I think one of the most important things from an S&C perspective is to establish a good training environment. Athletes have to want to train. Athletes have to enjoy being there. And if that's not established first, then you're not going to have buy-in. You're not going to have people committed, and you're not going to have people enjoying it. And segueing again to Dan Pfaff last year, it was interesting that one of the main things he talked about from an S&C, or not just S&C, coaching perspective, is that athletes need to have fun. And you don't often hear coaches say that. You don't often hear people in industry say that, especially some of the sports in New Zealand. That word's not used a lot. There's the old mantra in New Zealand about hard work, doing your time, putting the hard yards in. It was cool to hear. The environment needs to be right, and as part of that, empowering your athletes. Athletes are generally confident people. Awesome. Not all of them, but especially from that learning model from younger athletes, not necessarily older athletes, is empower them, give them ownership, let them go. Well, balance that. Yes, but ownership, drive what they do, be involved in what they do, and also you showing genuine interest in them and what they do. I think, those are very important things. Getting back to probably more nuts and bolts with S&C, it seemed to me one of the main things I need to encourage or facilitate is a consistency of training. Athletes do not become good in one session overnight. It's an accumulation of training over years. And when that dawned on me, it made me realise don't dwell on one session missed, a session where they were sick or whatever. It's the long game, and going back to the environment and athlete buy-in, athlete knowledge, which I'll talk to as well, to facilitate that consistency and continuity of training, so that over years we get good progress, good outcomes. And for me, that's what I keep an eye on, is that long-term development. Again, not overstating it. Don't worry about the session right now. It's about accumulation, a number of sessions together. Continue with nuts and bolts, and it's one that everyone probably talks to, is athletes need to move well. Sports produce asymmetries. They put bodies into weird positions. Adaptation. If we're to facilitate consistency in training, continuity in training, athletes need to be fit and well. And as part of that, they need to move well. They're likely to be injured, develop overuse type injuries, develop bad patterns, or we can encourage a change from bad patterns. But athletes need to move well, and move well in the context of the sport. So different sports will have different ideas of what good movement is. But a colleague of mine just came back from France, and I forget the person he met up with. James Decathlete just got just broke the world record. Get his name. That's embarrassing. But one of his sayings was to bring his athlete back to the middle. Oh, it's brilliant. Bring the athlete back to the middle. Sport is about, like I said, asymmetries. We exaggerate different things. We get maladaptations, and what he felt part of his role was to bring athletes back to the middle. Brilliant. Moving on, I mentioned as part of being a young S&C to have a good empirical understanding of training, the knowledge behind it. And one of my philosophies, what I do. If someone asks me, why is this in the program, there should be a reason. And if there's no reason, why is it there? So everything should be rationalized and considered. And there might be times where I might say, hey, look, it's just fluff, or it's just six-pack training. But there's a reason why it's there. But have a rationalized approach that obviously is part of a bigger plan. I think I talked to it before as well. I think it's really important as S&Cs that we're reflective. And it's something I've noticed in other organisations, and the one I work for at the moment is reflective practice as a part that is something that is facilitated and supported. And I'm a big believer that each session is a time to learn from. So it's important to, like I've mentioned before, being a good S&C takes time, and to help facilitate that learning, we need to be reflective in what we do. I'm obviously just going through my list here.
Oh, that's good. Being reflective, I just wanted to jump in on that. The 9 S&C coaches that you are leading, you're facilitating reflective work as well?
My boss, the head of department, he's actually just put a program in place which facilitates reflective practice. It's a peer review process, and it's part of what we do is to reflect with another S&C and follow a process of reflection. So I'm obviously a part in facilitating that with my staff. Apart from that, if we didn't have that process, would I be asking people to reflect? It's a good question. I think I would informally, as part of process, ask what have you learnt this year, for example. But funny enough, I don't know if I would actually sit down with my guys and go through this list. I've only just sort of started with the job. Yeah, it's a good question. Bigger rocks, bigger fish to tick off first.
Let's move on with the list.
Right. One comment. This stuff I'm going to say now. Actually, I wrote down during that meeting we were talking about philosophies, and I don't think anyone said this, but I suddenly thought to myself, trust my gut. There are going to be times we get questioned. And I talked about a rationalized approach, and I get it. But you're going to have a gut. You're going to have a gut feeling about something that, yeah, you can rationalize, but you're not quite sure. But your experience tells you this is going to happen. Trust it. Trust it. So it sort of goes against what I talked about, rationalized approach. And it's interesting because it's a stage of learning. We talk about learning models. You go from a very procedural based understanding, forget the technical term. I'll never forget being in a lecturer and been talking about stages of learning and stages of expertise. And as you get later in your career, you don't necessarily do it because you know how it works, because you know it works. And that's reflected on just, trust that there are going to be situations where your gut saying, hey, I reckon this is worth a punt. Trust it. And now I'm going to contradict that again by reinforcing what I talked about, a rationalized understanding. To understand cause and effect. And I think when I wrote this down, this probably comes more from monitoring athletes, monitoring and understanding performance. Especially in some sports like cycling, I would challenge our program to know what athletes are going to do. Performance shouldn't happen by accident. In a sport like cycling, you should know what contributes to performance. Understand there's a human factor. The human factor can be an unknown, a hard factor, and a lot you can tease cause and effect. So as part of our role, you should understand cause and effect. Understand that if I do this, this will happen. And you might not know that straight away. So part of your role is to start understanding that if you're, say you're new to a sport or the sport's new to SNC, for example, but you should know if I do this, it's going to have this effect. And if not, start working it out. Next point, coming back to reflective practice, is continue to challenge what I do. It comes back to about not being complacent. Challenge what I do, challenge my processes. I talk about a rationalized approach, trusting gut, etc., but continue to challenge what I do. Continue to be better. And that's one of the cool things about our job is we can always be better. We can always learn. And the day it stops happening is probably the day I'll resign. It's just a job of learning. And following on the points here, but this is obviously my notes. Use sessions as a learning opportunity. I'm going to skip that. One of my colleagues, actually head of department, Stephen Hodder, one of his philosophies, which I've stolen, we actually stolen two of his, he said big rocks. And coming back to my point about marginal gains, you first get the 99% right. Well, that was his philosophy. His comment was get the big rocks right. Totally agree. Get the big basic things done well.
Yeah.
The thing I mentioned before. And then also to finish my list, interesting, Stephen Hodder said this because we just talked this before. Talk less, watch more was one of his philosophies. Totally agree. And that was the list that I'd written out for that meeting.
Okay, cool.
Cool process. Thoroughly recommend people do it.
So moving on from philosophies to values, what are your core values?
I'd say core value would definitely be around excellence. And I say that carefully because excellence can take you into a hole, take you into a big hole because you're always striving for it. But I think part of those philosophies talked about understanding cause and effect. In order to do that, you've got to be collecting information. You've got to be understanding the sport, being able to analyse the sport, being able to, again, collect information. I suppose being thorough. And with regards to excellence, talk about rationalisation. In order to rationalise, you've got to understand, am I reading? Am I understanding literature? Am I learning from others? Am I challenging myself? Yeah, I think a core value would definitely be excellence.
And you mentioned it can take you into a hole. This is because it's never good enough?
Well, that's right. It's probably something I should put as a philosophy. I might do it at the end of this phone call. Don't be harsh on yourself. Be proud of what you've done. Better. I don't think I have as good as I can be, but I do some good shit. Acknowledge that. But so I think that's something I'm aware of, and I'd say to others, look, strive for excellence. I get it, love it, but be happy with what you've done. Yes, you make mistakes, learn from them. You didn't intend to make mistakes. You weren't being deliberate about it. You can't be perfect. You can always strive to be perfect, but be happy with what you've done. So that it can, if you go down that hole of excellence and perfection, it could be a sad, sad journey.
Which person has influenced you most and why?
Yeah, this is an interesting, cool question, Christian. I don't know if there is one person. In my journey, there's been some quite awesome people that I've been lucky to be involved. And like I said, I came late to the piece, and my introduction to the industry was through my first certificate, my first study. And the lecturer who set up the course called John Winera, he wasn't even an S&C. Jeez, he wasn't even a PT. He was a biologist who knew about training. Interesting, his son won Mr. Universe, so there was obviously some pedigree there. But he was passionate, knowledgeable, and just a nice guy. Actually, it's probably another training philosophy. Be a nice guy, don't be an asshole. And he was
it's also part of the All Blacks, right? They have the no dickhead philosophy or something, or policy.
Is that
or
right?
something, right? I think so. I think I heard
it's a good policy.
It's a Kiwi thing, but it's a good one. It's a good one.
Well, yeah, you have to be. I mean, yeah. People don't want to work with dickheads, even if they're very good at their job. People don't want to be around them. Again, that's that environment thing I talked to before. But geez, what we're talking about? I forgot it.
Yeah, you talked about the teacher who was a biologist who happened to know about training and who was a good guy.
John was a top guy, and definitely early on helped me on my journey. And then, interestingly enough, the next person on my list is another teacher or lecturer, my master's supervisor, Greg Anson. Amazing guy, thorough, knowledgeable, highly intelligent. And some of the things I learned from there was around the critical thinking, the challenging, asking questions, seeking knowledge, and the critical thinking and being able to analyse and think outside the box was definitely skills from him. He pushed my brain in a way that I'd never been pushed before. You talk about training my brain. It was a full-on few years when I was doing my masters. Took too long to do my masters, but it was an amazing time. And then for actual S&Cs, Angus Ross. Angus Ross I actually work with now, but I've known Angus for 10 years, close to 10 years. And he was someone I met early on when I was working with athletes at a place called Academy of Sport. He was there as a S&C consultant, and Gus is a guru. He is amazing. And I've had lucky enough to have been working with him for almost 10 years now, still consider him a mentor, still learning things from him. He has a huge influence on what I do. Just an amazing guy. And then probably to finish my list, when I was reflecting on it, was a coach I worked with, and not in professional rugby. Mike Morhew was an amazing, is an amazing coach when I worked with him. I'm not sure if you understand the word mana. It's a Māori word. Means like respect. Probably respect's probably the closest word, but he had this mana, this respect about him. He never yelled. The players loved him. The players would die for him. And I'll never forget a situation. He was a very successful coach, and we'd won the season before. This was a club season. And so the following season, we had a bit of a losing streak. And so what does Mike do? He stands up for the meeting. Mike never stands up for the meeting. We normally have a meeting before, 2 days before the game. We have practice, everyone sits down together, players are on the floor, staff are in chairs, he's in a chair. He stands up. He gives the same sort of speech, the same tone of speech, talking about people are intently watching what Mike's saying. All he's done is stand up. And that's what Mike was understated as a coach. Like I said, never yelled, never screamed, massive mana, respect. We'd come into a huddle at half time or during an injury or something, and he'd be calm, collected, definitive in what people needed to do in roles. Never yelled, but he stood up in this meeting, and that changed our season. And so the reason why he's an example meant someone that a highlight to me in my career was I'd never seen it before in a coach. The presence of the man was just amazing. The respect he had was amazing. It was. I don't know if it impacted on me as a coach. I know I have mellowed with age. I don't yell as much as I used to. Maybe I learned that from him.
So dealing with individuals, obviously we're working with athletes and sometimes they have an idea of what's best for them. If their idea is very different from your idea, how do you deal with that situation?
There's a bit that goes in before that meeting, because when I write my notes based on your question, is I think so that scenario comes up, but before that scenario even comes up, if you have the opportunity to, you've already established a relationship, you already have an understanding of the sport, you have an understanding of the long-term plan, etc., etc. You have an understanding what the coach's vision is. And the reason I bring it up, if an athlete wants to suggest something that's different to what I'm recommending, well, there's a whole different things to consider. So, is what the athlete asking completely different to what the coach's vision and coach's plan is, let alone different to mine? Is the athlete actually just acknowledging too, just taking a step back, that I firmly believe there's more than one way to train an athlete. I obviously have my preference. It's not the best preference. So coming back to being the older guy, I'm less threatened by an athlete saying, I reckon we should do it this way. Cool. However, coming back, it needs to be rationalised and discussed with regards to the plan, the coach's vision, this, why this will work. But coming back to your question, with all that discussed, the biggest thing is talk, communication, and just talking it through. And if indeed the athlete is vehement, and even if I totally disagree, and this needs to be done with the coach as well, it needs to be done with this, because if the athlete's looking to take a different approach, it has implications for the performance, it has implications for the team or the individual and the coach, it becomes a wider discussion. So I'm talking in circles, talking out with the athlete. I'm not threatened if they've got a different suggestion, but it has to be talked through. It's not as simple as what the athlete wants. Comes back to coach, comes back to my suggestions. Then that the athlete, the way the athlete wants to do it, and he's vehement, he or she's vehement, the coach is agreeable. Let's make it. We'll try it. I'm complexing the question, but that's the nature of working with people and programs across multiple providers, coaching staff. It's complicated, but it's simplified if people talk. People don't talk, shit goes wrong.
Yeah, and that leads perfectly into the next question. In a team, normally we are different members of the support staff, and every member wears his own hat, has his own ideas and whatsoever. So if there are differences of ideas, especially if it's very different from your idea, how do you deal with that in the support staff?
Well, you have to rationalize it. I'm aware of a situation where I don't want to go into it because you got physio and S&C, total different approaches, and there's almost a battle about whose approach wins. A battle is not a good thing, especially if the athletes catch wind of it. But you have to come through some consensus. You have to talk it out, rationalize it out, and I'm passing the buck. But ultimately, it has to go through the gatekeeper, whether that's a coach, a high performance director, a senior staff member. There has to be someone who says, no, I've listened to everyone, we're going to go this way. That's me passing the buck. But there is not one way to train an athlete. Staff are going to have different biases, different approaches. So someone needs to stand up and go, we're going to do it this way. But in saying that, you need to check your emotion at the door, try not to take things personally, acknowledging and sometimes you just have to try things. And I'm observing this program in distance where you've got S&C's totally different approach, and someone's going to win the fight, so to speak, and they're going to go a certain direction, and I hope it works. And if it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board, and I'm sure this has happened many, many times before, but I think, yeah, it comes to talking it out, rationalising, and people putting their case together in a respectful, non-emotional way, and then ultimately it comes to the gatekeeper. You need to have someone, I talked about mana before, the respect, someone who's got the experience, understands the big picture, understands with the vision of the coach if it's not the coach, and they make the final call. Yeah, it's not easy, but if you're someone who acknowledges that there isn't one way, if you're not, then relationships start to get strained.
And you mentioned someone has to stand up and make the decision. So if the decision that is taken is very different from what you believe should have happened or should happen, how do you deal with that?
Well, I go with it, because if you don't have buy-in, if I'm not presenting buy-in to the athletes pick up on that I don't think this is going to work, it probably won't. Yeah, you'd have to back yourself if you back yourself, you didn't think it worked, but then it needs to be consensus, because as talking about, there's a delivery team, you've got your coach, etc. It has to be consensus. If not, things will break down, things will start to break up from within. And if from an environment is such an important thing, it needs to be consensus. So what was going to work. Yeah, I'm just reflecting, because there's been times where I have, and there's times where I haven't. And when I haven't, has it worked out well? I can't. Yeah, just trying to think. No, it hasn't worked out well. It's a tough one, Christian, because yeah, I would like to think that I would buy in, try this approach, present unity, and just see if it happens, and come back to the long game. Like I said, these things don't happen overnight. I appreciate in the sports we work in, the Olympic cycles, you actually don't have a lot of time, but you just have to have faith. Like, you've got to try this, and if it fails, it fails. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think to answer that question, we also need to be a bit more specific. I think I can talk from my own experience. If it's a question about training philosophy, you're probably easier to align than in a situation where really athlete well-being is put at risk because of a certain approach chosen. So I think it can't be answered easily, yes or no.
Or that's different. Like, something I didn't talk about in my philosophies, but it's almost a given, is actually I think it's part of your accreditation. Well, I know it's been mentioned somewhere. Do no harm.
Yep.
So if there's so that's a different thing. So if we're talking about someone having different ideas about an approach to improve performance that you think, no, that's just not going to work, they're going to get worse. Okay, that's different. But someone who's going to do something that can create harm, well, no, that's a simple no-go. No, I would fight that. No. If someone was promoting something that was going to do someone harm, that's a line. I would definitely fight that. And if the gatekeeper chose to go that way, I don't know, I'd be protesting that. The gatekeeper would have to have a very good reason. Personally, if it's going to do harm, no, I'd be fighting that totally. That's a given. But I haven't been in that situation. I think we're in an industry where people genuinely don't do things that are going to create harm. But acknowledge that we're going to do things that are going to screw their body up for the rest of their lives. Sport is not healthy. Get it. You're going to have stuffed joints, bad scar tissue, bad movement patterns, for the rest of your life. I get it. But you're talking about harm in a bad way, whether it's emotional or some physical trauma, above and beyond what we'd expect from training, because we do some pretty terrible things to ourselves. So I suppose it defined what harm is. Because I remember having a discussion with a physio about, can't remember what it was, about you can't do that, that's harmful. And I can't remember, I think it was about the long-term effects of the supplementation. I think maybe weight gain, I can't remember. But I said to the physio, mate, if you're worried about that, athletes shouldn't compete. Sport is not healthy. It's, and I loved him as a physio, because it was very much about, the athlete first, well-being, harmony, and that sort of thing. Sport is not healthy, and it was interesting. He was almost fighting that. Like, you don't want this guy to perform better because there could be some long-term effects. Well, mate, don't compete. Going on. Sport's not healthy. Full stop. But obviously, we don't want to do that.
How does a typical training day or day in the life of an SNC coach looks like?
A typical day. I suppose my day is different to what I'm going to talk to now, because my day starts on a laptop looking at administration things. But and I suppose this is very procedural based. It starts with setting up for the day, setting up for a session, obviously working on the floor, getting your session done, debriefing that session, come back to reflective practice, talking with the coach. Obviously you talk with the coach before session, if you're lucky enough to be in a sport where the coach is there. But obviously debrief how the session went, do some administration in between sessions where there might be ongoing programming. Do some data analyze data, do some reports, and if you get the chance through the day, informally talk to other staff, around comms with regards to day-to-day operations or just general chit-chat. What did you read? What article? What did you see? I'm quite lucky environment I'm in. We have some very good S&Cs, and we will talk sessions through. Why did you do that? I've just seen this on Facebook. What do you reckon? And then other things that might fill your day is case management meetings. I talked about comms before. As you'll well know, it can get a burden, all the bloody meetings, all the bloody emails. But if done well, comms, communication, it's just so important. Again, talked about being on the same page, delivering a cohesive program. Comms is all around that. It's so important. And then rest of the day, probably a bit of facility work because I run the facility, and then my general leadership work with my staff, some mentoring, some discussions. And I'd like to, but I'm very bad at it, I'd like my day at some stage to involve some reading. I'm terrible at it. But I would love, as part of my typical day, I had some reading, I had some white space to do some thinking, but I don't. But that's what I'd recommend.
How do you design the training program? Take us through it step by step.
It's funny when I saw this question. I know I've got notes here somewhere because I used to teach this stuff, but when I thought about doing it in brief, I've just started a new sport, so this is quite an apt question. And one of the big things I do when I start a new sport is I want to understand the sport. So I want to understand, obviously, the sport, the rules, the biomechanics. I want to understand the athletes that I'm going to be training, understand their role in the sport, understanding the coach's plan, and then understanding, the big rocks. What needs to be improved? How am I going to improve it? And how I'm going to monitor that improvement. So coming back to cause and effect, what am I going to do to understand cause and effect? In the sport that I've just started working in, I've started collecting a lot of data, a lot of training data, and I'm starting to run correlations and on water performance and testing performance. And I want to tease out, as part of this, do a bit of reading around the sport and what's the literature, what's the science showing us, and trying to piece it together. And once I get understanding of the sport, some of the cause and effect, what sort of training works, understand the athlete, the coach's plan, then I put my plan in place. And that plan is goal-driven. So I talked about philosophy around athlete-focused, performance-driven, coach-led. Well, my plans are goal-specific with regards to improving a specific performance aspect or whatever's part of the coach's plan. And then where I have the resource available, because you don't always have the resource available, programs are individualised. And individualisation can take time because you've got to learn to understand your athlete, but always looking to fine-tune that program. Obviously, there's the big stuff allowing for their position, their age, their reaction to training, but then continuing to fine-tune that. And as I mentioned, whatever plan I do, it's integrated. So whatever loading, programming, the phases, the periodization, it's integrated into the athlete's or the coach's plan. It needs to complement. It needs to match. And I know I've talked about this a few times now. It needs to be monitored. So it's part of that reflective practice, learning, understanding, and understanding cause and effect. You need to monitor. And that can be a black hole in itself. I'm well known. I monitor a lot. I record a lot, and I probably do more than I need to. I could do a lot less and be as effective, but that's my personality. I want to understand, and eventually I'll funnel it. I'll start with a massive amount of data, and I'll funnel to key things, and that's just how I work. When I was with cycling, that's what was happening. I was starting with all this data and I was coming down to what I thought were the small things, big things. I need to understand data. And that's big picture how I design programs. Big stuff around understanding, And then, yeah, being goal specific, individualized, integrated, actually probably all the things that's out of a textbook.
Do you want to nominate someone to be interviewed?
I do know Nick Gill, the All Blacks S&C. I have worked with Gilly. I don't know Gilly well enough though to say, hey, Christian's a good guy. You should talk to Christian. Because I bet Gilly gets it all the time.
For sure.
But if you get the opportunity to listen to him, he's a smooth operator. He's got the gift of the gab. He operates well. He's obviously got longevity. I mean, he's been in the All Blacks now 10 years, 10 years, which is huge. To be in the All Blacks 10 years, I think he's been around longer than many other providers have. But it's interesting, the physio, Pete Gallagher, has been around as long as well. And it's quite interesting when you talk about successful programs and their longevity. You look at the All Blacks since they had that horrible loss in 1997. And since then, 97, 2003, 99, 2003. I'm just trying, 2007. 2007, that game against France. That horrible game against France. And since then, the All Blacks have turned a corner and, they're an incredibly successful team. What have they got, like a 90% win rate, 87% 94% win rate. Most highest win rates of a professional team in the world. And to reflect that, when you look at the longevity of their support staff, you're not surprised. They've got a very, I don't recommend that, but Dominic well enough. Good guy to talk to.
So that's the answer, McGill? Nick Gill, sorry, not McGill. Nick Gill, right?
Nick Gill, Nick Gill, Gilly. He's an interesting cat because he still works as a lecturer, I think. He's still involved with university. PhD, he lectured at, I think, Waikato Uni or Wintec for a while. He has his fingers in a lot of pies. Obviously PhD, supervisor, he still supervises now. He's published, he has students publishing. So he's involved in that empirical understanding side of it. He's always learning. And on top of that, practicing with the All Blacks. It's not a busy job, it's just busy at times. He might spend, 5 weeks a year with the All Blacks. Their franchises, doing their own thing, and he's monitoring remotely. He'll go visit. So that affords some time to do other things. I've heard about him and Pete. They've travelled overseas to visit different programs and to learn from them, and it's quite a strength. I was really lucky because the All Blacks are obviously synonymous with winning. Doors open when you mention you with the All Blacks, and I was lucky to take All Blacks Sevens team overseas last year. Not last year, the year before. And we got opportunities that I couldn't believe. Like we went to Oakland Raiders for a day. And when they saw us walk in, I got my All Blacks kit in, All Blacks kit. New Zealand Sevens All Blacks, but they don't know the difference. And people come in to talk to us, and I don't follow NFL that much. So it turned out, there was these legends coming to talk to us. This one guy came up and talked to us, and he walked away and he said, "Oh, he's a nice guy. Who's that?" He turned out to be the highest paid player in NFL. But because we were wearing All Blacks kit, people came to see us and wanted to talk to us, and that opened doors. And I got to see the NFL, so the Oakland Raiders. I got to see how they operate. That was fascinating. I got notes if you want them, Christian. Fascinating to see how they operate. And I got to visit Strata, independent commercial organisation that trained athletes off season. So, professional football, soccer, baseball, ice hockey, off season. They'd send their athletes to these people to train them. And that was fascinating seeing how they worked. But what did dawn on me in that trip was it's easy to train genetic freaks. The programs are actually quite simple, and they need to be because they're freaks. You're not trying to get the 1%ers. They're the 1%ers. And in New Zealand, we have a very small talent pool. We have to make the most of what we've got. 160 million people, 400 million people, and you get the cream of the crop. It was fascinating. The approach with the NFL was more about keeping them in one piece and trying to make them better. It works. I mean, they're freaks. There was guys in the Oakland Raiders team. They had 3 players who could run low 10 100s, and they weigh 100 kgs. You got 3 guys who can run a low 10 100, weigh 100 kgs. Who does that? They had 3 of them. I saw some big-ass players. I don't know the positions in the NFL. They were doing their recovery day. There was one guy who had 160 kgs on a bar doing some mid-thigh shrugs. So start from 5, power up, do some shrugs. He was talking to his mate. He's talking to his mate as he's doing these 150 kg shrugs. And the coaches watching this, the rugby coaches I was with, they went, Keno, should he be doing that? He's not even warmed up. I went, that is his warm-up. That's how fucking strong he is. It's just so different, Christian. These are genetic freaks. Obviously, with a bit of augmentation. It was. But I came back to the All Blacks. Their reputation, that people want to hear what their system is. What people have read their books. It's great system. If you get the chance to read, talk to anyone, take it. Sorry, I've gone on.
No, thanks. That's good. That's good. Cool. So to wrap it off, where can people find you?
Where can they find me? Well, I'm based at Cambridge, Barney Drone, working for High Performance Sport. Find on the website. But yeah, based in Cambridge, Waikato at Barney Drone, where we run a gym out there, part of High Performance Sport. Obviously, cycling is a big part of it, but we also operate other sports as well. Athletes based in the region. We have 3 centralised sports in Cambridge or Waikato, and that's cycling, rowing, and triathlon. Triathlon needs to be centralised, but less. In the future, we're expecting canoe to centralise to the Waikato, but at the moment they're based in Auckland, probably for the foreseeable future. But apart from that, work with a range of athletes who are based in Cambridge.
Yeah. Any online channels? Or you are too old for that?
No, I'm a consumer of knowledge, not really a presenter of knowledge at this stage. No, I don't generally put myself out there.
Okay.
Happy to be behind the scenes, learning. Definitely talk to people who've asked, but no, definitely don't put myself out there. I think I've got far too much more to learn. And I know there's people out there far more informed than I am. I talked about Angus Ross. Crazy, he's always reading, crazy knowledge, crazy experience. He's the sort of guy who should be getting his word out there. And you get people who have an opinion and talk stuff, and it might be well, we're all biased. But point being, I don't think I'm that guy to be talking to the masses. I've definitely got something to say. Don't think I need to say it.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for your time and the insights. That was really good.